Karel ducked another shot, his mind racing. Enhancement? His muscles moved like a well-oiled machine, his reflexes sharper than they'd ever been. But there wasn't time to dwell on the implications. The remaining attackers shifted tactics, one laying down suppressive fire while the other moved to flank him. Mariel's voice rang out again, calm yet commanding. The device I used last night, it wasn't just for me. It seems you absorbed some of the energy as well. What does that mean? Karel shouted, sliding behind a structural column as energy bolts whizzed past. It means you're stronger, faster, better. For now. She sounded almost amused, as though this were a regular occurrence. Focus, soldier. Sure, no pressure, Karel muttered, peeking out just long enough to spot the flanker. With an almost instinctive flick of his wrist, his stunner fired. The second attacker crumpled before they could get another shot off. The final assailant hesitated, clearly realizing the odds had shifted. They turned to retreat, but Karel wasn't having it. A strange energy pulsed in his veins, driving him forward like an unstoppable force. In one fluid motion, he closed the distance, his enhanced reflexes letting him disarm the enemy with surgical precision. The attacker hit the floor hard, and Karel stood over them, catching his breath. His heart pounded, not from exertion, but from the adrenaline, and something deeper. A hum of energy still coursed through him. Not bad, Mariel remarked, stepping into the corridor as the shimmering field around her dissipated. She waved a hand, and the attacker floated up, encased in some kind of stasis field. I'd say you're adapting quickly. Karel shot her a look. You want to tell me exactly what's going on here, Diplomat? Mariel tilted her head, her faintly glowing eyes narrowing with amusement. I told you the energy transfer was necessary for my survival. What I didn't anticipate was your body's capacity to absorb it. That's rare among humans. Rare? Try impossible, Karel said, his voice laced with suspicion. What else aren't you telling me? Mariel's expression softened. There's no time for a full explanation, but you've been enhanced. Temporarily. The effects will fade in a few days unless we reinforce the connection. Reinforce? You mean more of? Karel gestured vaguely toward her, his face reddening slightly. That thing we did last night? Exactly, she said, her tone all business despite the faint blush coloring her cheeks. But for now, we have more pressing matters. She gestured to the unconscious attackers. These weren't random intruders. They were here for me. Why? Karel asked, stepping closer, his instincts sharpening. Let's just say my position in these negotiations is contentious, she replied cryptically. And some would prefer I not succeed. Karel sighed, rubbing his temples. So, let me get this straight. You're a glowing, high-maintenance alien diplomat whose biology involves weird energy exchanges. And now I'm some kind of superhuman sidekick. Mariel's lips twitched into a smirk. That's an oversimplification, but yes. Welcome to interstellar diplomacy, Officer Carter. Before Karel could respond, the station-wide alarm blared again. A synthesized voice echoed through the corridor. Security breach escalating. Hostile reinforcements detected in docking Bay 2. Mariel straightened, her expression shifting to one of steely resolve. We need to move. If they're bringing reinforcements, they're after more than just me. They want to destabilize the entire peace summit. Great. Another day, another galactic crisis, Karel muttered, checking the charge on his stunner. He paused, looking at her. You're sure this energy thing won't make me explode or something? Mariel laughed softly, a musical sound that eased the tension for a moment. I promise, Officer Carter, you'll hold together. Now, let's go save the station. As they moved swiftly toward the docking bay, Karel couldn't help but glance at her, a strange mix of annoyance and admiration bubbling inside him. Whatever this partnership was, it was far from normal. But then, nothing in his life had been normal since the moment she'd stepped into it. In a small, rebellious part of him found that he didn't entirely mind. Karel sprinted down the corridor with Mariel at his side, the station's alarms pounding in his ears. As they neared the docking bay, he couldn't help but marvel at his newfound speed. Every step felt lighter, every movement more precise. It was as though his body had been tuned to perfection overnight. And it was all thanks to the glowing Diplomat running beside him. Are we walking into a firefight, or do you have a plan? Karel asked, tightening his grip on his stunner. Plans are overrated, Mariel said, her tone betraying a sly confidence. But if it helps, I'm more than capable of handling myself. Good to know, Karel muttered. Because I have a feeling this isn't going to end with handshakes and apologies. They rounded the final corner into the docking bay. The vast space was a maze of cargo containers, loading ramps, and towering support beams. In the center of it all, a sleek black shuttle hovered just above the deck, its engines humming ominously. Around it, half a dozen figures in stealth suits were setting up some sort of device, something with a lot of blinking red lights. Tell me that's not a bomb, Karel groaned. It's a bomb, Mariel confirmed, her voice calm but edged with urgency. And a sophisticated one at that. If they detonate it, the entire diplomatic wing could go up in flames. Karel scanned the scene. Great. So, how do we stop them? I'll handle the bomb, Mariel said, her glowing eyes narrowing as she assessed the situation. You distract them. Distract them? Sure, I'll just wave my arms and yell, hey, look over here. That'll work great. Mariel smirked. Use your enhancements, Officer Carter. Be creative. Before Karel could protest, she darted away, her lithe form disappearing into the shadows. He sighed, rolling his shoulders and taking a deep breath. Be creative, he muttered. Right? Let's see how this goes. With a burst of speed, Karel launched himself into the fray. He vaulted over a stack of cargo crates, landing with a precision that startled even him. Hey, he shouted, drawing the attention of the nearest assailants. Who ordered the Space Force Special? The first attacker raised a weapon, but Karel was already moving. He zigzagged between the crates, closing the distance in a blur. A swift kick sent the weapon flying, and a well-placed punch knocked the attacker out cold. Two more turned toward him, their movements synchronized and precise. Karel ducked under a volley of energy bolts, his enhanced senses allowing him to predict their trajectories. He grabbed a nearby cargo hook, swinging it like an improvised weapon. The clang of metal against armor echoed through the bay as he disarmed one assailant and sent the other sprawling. Not bad for a mechanic, Karel quipped, his pulse racing. He turned toward the shuttle, only to find himself staring down the barrel of a sleek, alien rifle. Drop the weapon, a modulated voice ordered, the attacker's face obscured by their helmet. Karel froze, his mind racing for options. Just as he was about to make his move, a soft hum filled the air. The assailant hesitated, glancing over their shoulder. A second later, they collapsed, their weapon clattering to the floor. Behind them stood Mariel, her hand glowing faintly with residual energy. Nice timing, Karel said, picking up the rifle. I told you, I can handle myself, she replied, already moving toward the bomb. Cover me while I disarm this. Cover you? From what? Karel asked, but his question was answered almost immediately. The shuttle's hatch opened, and a towering figure stepped out. It was clad in heavy armor, its movements deliberate and menacing. The weapon it carried was massive, a high-energy cannon that looked capable of vaporizing half the bay. Oh, come on, Karel muttered, raising the alien rifle. The armored figure aimed its cannon, and Karel dove for cover as a searing beam of energy sliced through the air. He returned fire, but the rifle barely made a dent in the figure's armor. Mariel, he shouted. Any chance you can hurry this up? Working on it, she called back, her fingers dancing over the bomb's interface. Just keep it distracted. Distraction, right? My specialty, Karel grumbled. He grabbed a loose piece of piping and hurled it at the figure, aiming for its weapon. The impact didn't do much, but it was enough to throw off its aim. Karel used the opening to close the distance, sliding under its cannon and firing a shot directly into its exposed knee joint. The figure stumbled but didn't fall. Instead, it swung its cannon like a club, forcing Karel to backflip, out of range. He landed with a flourish, momentarily stunned by his own agility. Okay, that was cool, he admitted, dodging another swing. Behind him, Mariel let out a triumphant cry. Got it. Bomb disarmed. Great, Karel yelled, ducking under another swing. Now how about we deal with this guy? Mariel stepped forward, her hands glowing with intense energy. "Step aside, Carter." Karel didn't argue. He rolled out of the way as Mariel raised her hands, releasing a blast of pure energy that struck the armored figure square in the chest. The force sent it flying into the shuttle, which sparked and sputtered before crashing to the ground. The bay fell silent, save for the crackling of damaged electronics. Karel stood, panting, and gave Mariel a lopsided grin. "Not bad for a diplomat." She raised an eyebrow, her glow fading. "Not bad for a human." Before Karel could respond, the station security team arrived, weapons drawn and looking very confused. Chief Morgan pushed through the crowd, her gaze shifting between Karel, Mariel, and the smoldering wreckage of the shuttle. "What the hell happened here?" she demanded. Karel shrugged, wiping a bit of soot from his cheek. "You know, the usual. Just saving the station from a diplomatic disaster." Morgan sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. "I want a full report. Now." Mariel stepped forward, her posture regal despite the chaos around her. "That won't be necessary. I'll ensure the incident is logged through the proper diplomatic channels." Morgan frowned, but didn't argue. Instead, she turned to Karel. "And you? What's your excuse for playing superhero?" Karel glanced at Mariel, who gave him a subtle, approving nod. "Just doing my job, Chief." As the security team began cleaning up the scene, Mariel leaned closer to Karel. "You handled yourself well, Officer Carter. Perhaps better than I expected." "High praise," he said, smirking. "But you still owe me an explanation." "All in good time," she replied, her enigmatic smile returning. "For now, we have a station to secure, and I suspect this is only the beginning." Karel sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Of course it is. What a life." As they walked away from the wreckage, Karel couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get a whole lot stranger. And, if he was honest with himself, he wasn't entirely opposed to it. The chaos in the docking bay was barely behind them when Karel found himself walking alongside Mariel through the gleaming halls of the station's central administrative wing. His adrenaline still buzzed, his new enhancements subtly humming beneath his skin. Every sound, every flicker of light, felt sharper, clearer. "You're awfully quiet," Mariel said, her voice a blend of curiosity and amusement. Karel glanced at her. "I just stopped a walking tank, dodged a literal energy cannon, and backflipped for the first time in my life. Forgive me for needing a second to process." Mariel chuckled softly, her green glowing eyes catching the artificial light. "You handled yourself admirably. But you're not wrong to have questions." "Glad you brought that up," Karel said, stopping in his tracks. "First question, what exactly is happening to me? Because I'm not buying that this is just a side effect of helping you out." Mariel turned to face him, her expression softening. "Your enhancements are an unintended consequence of our interaction. My species' energy isn't just bioelectric. It's symbiotic. When I transferred it to you, your physiology responded uniquely. Most humans would experience a fleeting effect, a momentary boost. But you," she gestured to him, a faint smile on her lips. "Your body embraced it." Karel blinked. "So what? I'm some kind of supercharged human now." "Not quite," Mariel said. "You're stronger, faster, more perceptive, but it's temporary. Without regular exposure to my energy, these abilities will fade." He frowned. "You mean I need to keep milking you to keep this up?" Her cheeks flushed faintly. "I wouldn't put it that way. But yes, periodic energy transfers would maintain the enhancements." Karel groaned, running a hand through his hair. "Fantastic. I'm a walking battery charger for a glowing alien diplomat. You're also alive because of it," she said, her tone turning serious. "That armored figure you fought, it wasn't random. Whoever they were, they knew exactly where to strike. And they were targeting me." Carol's frustration simmered down as her words sank in. "Why you? Diplomatic immunity doesn't stop political enemies from taking risks," she said, resuming their walk. "My presence here threatens certain factions who profit from instability between our species. I suspect tonight was a warning." "A warning with a bomb?" Karel said. "Not exactly subtle, nor effective. Thanks to you," Mariel said, glancing at him. "That's why I need your help, Karel. This wasn't a one-time event. They'll come for me again. Let me guess, he said, raising an eyebrow. You want me to play bodyguard now? She stopped, turning to him fully. I want someone I can trust. Someone capable. You've proven yourself to be both. Karel opened his mouth to argue, but hesitated. The station's metallic hum seemed louder in the pause, as if the place itself were listening. Finally, he sighed. All right, but we do this my way. No secrets. No half-truths. Mariel nodded, her expression softening. Agreed. Before either of them could say more, Karel's comm unit buzzed. He tapped it. Carter here? Chief Morgan's voice came through, sharp and irritated. Carter, get to the security hub. Now. We got another incident, and you're tied to it. Karel shot Mariel a look. What kind of incident? Docking records show that shuttle from the bay didn't come alone. Its sister ship is still out there, and it's heading straight for us. The security hub was a whirlwind of activity when Karel and Mariel arrived. Holographic displays covered the walls, each one showing different angles of the station's perimeter. In the center of the chaos stood Chief Morgan, her arms crossed and her scowl as sharp as ever. Carter, she barked as he approached. Care to explain why our station has suddenly become a magnet for assassins? Wish I knew, Chief, Karel said, glancing at the screens. But I've got a feeling it has something to do with our guest. Morgan's gaze shifted to Mariel, who met it without flinching. Your presence here was supposed to ensure peace, not bring warships to our doorstep. The ship isn't mine, Mariel said calmly. It belongs to whoever sent those attackers. And if they're brazen enough to launch a second wave, it means they're desperate. Desperate enough to blow us all to hell, Morgan snapped. Their ship's on an intercept course, and its weapons are hot. If you've got any bright ideas, now's the time. Mariel stepped closer to the displays, her glowing eyes scanning the incoming vessel. We need to disable it before it gets within firing range. Do you have any fighters on standby? Morgan shook her head. We're a diplomatic station, not a military base. Closest thing we've got is a couple of cargo drones with minimal armaments. That's not enough, Mariel said, frowning. We'll have to board it. Karel blinked. Board it? Are you out of your mind? Desperate times, Officer Carter, she said, her tone firm. You've already proven you can handle yourself in a fight. Are you in? He looked at her, then at the screens, where the enemy ship loomed closer by the second. Finally, he let out a frustrated sigh. What's the plan? 10 minutes later, Karel found himself strapped into a small transport pod, hurtling through space toward the enemy ship. Mariel sat beside him, her calm demeanor a sharp contrast to the chaos unfolding around them. Remind me why this is a good idea? Karel asked, gripping the controls. Because letting them fire on the station isn't an option, she replied. And because I trust you, he snorted. You got a weird way of showing it. The pod jolted as it docked with the enemy vessel. Karel unbuckled himself, drawing his stunner as the hatch opened with a hiss. The air inside was thick and stale, a sharp contrast to the sterile atmosphere of the station. Mariel led the way, her glowing presence lighting the dim corridor. They moved quickly but cautiously, their footsteps muffled by the ship's padded floors. Where to? Karel whispered. The control room, she said. If we can disable their weapons, we can force them to retreat. They rounded a corner and ran straight into a patrol of armed assailants. Karel fired first, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to take down two before they could react. Mariel raised her hands, releasing a pulse of energy that sent the remaining attackers sprawling. Not bad, Karel said, stepping over one of the unconscious bodies. We're not done yet, she replied, quickening her pace. They reached the control room moments later. Mariel began working on the console, her fingers flying across the alien interface. Karel stood guard, his stunner at the ready. Hurry up, he said, glancing nervously down the corridor. We got company? Almost there, she said, her voice calm but focused. The sound of approaching footsteps grew louder. Karel gritted his teeth, preparing for the fight. Any day now, Mariel? The console beeped, and Mariel stepped back. Done. Their weapons are offline. Great, Karel said, firing a shot at the first assailant around the corner. Now how do we get out of here? Mariel smiled. I have an idea, but you're not going to like it. Why does that not surprise me? He muttered as she grabbed his arm, her glow intensifying. A split second later, the world around him dissolved into light. When the blinding light faded, Karel stumbled, his legs buckling under the sudden shift. The metallic tang of the enemy ship's corridors was gone. Instead, he found himself standing back on Gaia 2, in the heart of the diplomatic wing. Mariel's glow faded, leaving her slightly pale but composed. Teleportation, Karel muttered, clutching his knees. You couldn't have used that before we got shot at? It's a last resort, Mariel replied, her voice tinged with exhaustion. The energy required is immense. But we're safe now. Speak for yourself, Karel said, shaking off his disorientation. He looked around, the station's polished walls and bioluminescent strips a stark contrast to the gritty interior of the enemy vessel. What about the ship? I deactivated their weapon systems and set the engines to overheat, Mariel said. They'll retreat or be forced into emergency shutdown. Either way, they won't pose a threat. Karel's comm unit crackled to life. Chief Morgan's voice burst through, strained but relieved. Carter, report. What the hell just happened? We're back on the station, Karel replied. The enemy ship's out of commission. Mariel pulled a teleportation trick. Long story. There was a pause, then a dry laugh. Of course she did. Get to the security hub for debriefing. We need to figure out who's behind this mess. Minutes later, Karel and Mariel stood in the security hub, facing Chief Morgan and a wall of holographic displays. The enemy ship had pulled away, its engines glowing ominously as it limped toward the outer edges of the system. Looks like they're running, Morgan said, crossing her arms. But they'll be back. And next time, they might not hold back. They won't have a chance, Mariel said firmly. Now that we know who they are. Morgan raised an eyebrow. You do? Mariel nodded, pulling up a hologram of a sleek sigil, a red, serpentine shape coiling around a jagged star. Karel recognized it from the armor of the attackers aboard the ship. The Drelkin Syndicate, Mariel said, her tone ice-cold. A rogue faction that profits from conflict between humans and my species. They're attempting to sabotage this station's mission of peace. And you're their target, Morgan said. Because if you succeed, they lose. Exactly, Mariel replied. But now we have proof of their involvement. This sigil and the technology recovered from the attackers will confirm their affiliation. Once this evidence reaches my government, the Syndicate will face the full weight of interstellar law. Morgan leaned back, her skepticism visible. You're confident that'll stop them? It will take time, Mariel admitted. But it will cut off their resources and expose their operatives. Without their funding and secrecy, they'll crumble. Karel frowned. And what happens to Gaia 2 in the meantime? They know where you are. They'll come back. They might, Mariel said, glancing at him. Which is why I'm asking you to stay by my side, Karel. Morgan's eyes narrowed. You want him to play bodyguard? Not just a bodyguard, Mariel said, her voice carrying a faint warmth. A partner. He's proven he's capable of more than defense. His unique enhancements make him invaluable to my mission. Karel leaned against the nearest console, rubbing his temples. So, let me get this straight. You want me to keep charging up with your energy, stay by your side, and fight off shadowy assassins while you try to save the galaxy? Mariel tilted her head, a playful glint in her glowing eyes. That's an accurate summary, yes? And what happens when my enhancements wear off, he asked. They won't, as long as we maintain the energy transfer, she said, her voice softening. But this is your choice, Karel. I won't force you. Morgan watched the exchange silently, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke. Carter, it's your call. But if you stay, you're taking on more than just station security. You'll be stepping into interstellar politics. That's messy business. Karel sighed, looking from Morgan to Mariel. The events of the past day, the enhancements, the fight, the strange connection he felt to Mariel, all ran through his mind. He had always wanted a life beyond mundane patrols and corporate debts. This wasn't what he expected, but maybe it was exactly what he needed. All right, he said finally. I'm in, but I've got conditions. Mariel raised an eyebrow. Conditions? No more surprises, he said. If I'm doing this, I need to know everything. Full disclosure. Agreed, Mariel said, smiling faintly. And, Karel added, if this gets me killed, I'm haunting you. Mariel laughed softly, the tension in the room easing. Fair enough. Morgan shook her head, muttering, you're either brave or insane, Carter. Probably both.